So now let's get on with the show. This week's episode is so interesting. I learned a lot from it, and it's given me some real light bulb moments and things I want to go away and research. My guest today is 31 and was diagnosed autistic in November 2020. Originally from Canada, she now lives in Southeast Asia, where she runs her own business as a coach, speaker, and author. Growing up, she suffered with numerous health conditions, anxiety, and depression that she believes were all linked to her undiagnosed autism. She spent years learning about health and nutrition in order to improve her own health and well-being, something she now helps others to do. Today, I'm delighted to share my conversation with Alyssa Washington. In our conversation, we talk about the connection between autism and physical health conditions, including disordered eating and digestive issues, emotional and physical hypersensitivity, how to connect with your body's wisdom and take control of your own health, and building a life and work that fits around our needs as autistic people. I hope you'll enjoy our conversation as much as I did. So, hi Alyssa, welcome to Square Peg. I've been so looking forward to talking to you. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm really great. How are you?
Really good, yeah. So I'd like to start by asking you a little bit about your diagnosis, which I know has been really recent, hasn't it?
Yes.
So how did that come about?
All right, so it was a little bit of a funny story. Basically, I've been living my whole life with essentially a very typical female Asperger's syndrome, or now called high-functioning adult autism or high-functioning autism, but just not knowing anything about it and not having any of the education. So a lot of the way that I am and the things that I need and the things that I've struggled with and all these things were just kind of labeled in my family like Allie things.
Okay.
And just very, very lovingly, my sister and my husband have always referred to me as a little alien, because we just didn't know, right? So,
yeah.
And so going on, and especially with the health challenges and the hormonal things that have gone on with me, like we could tell that I was hypersensitive. We knew that I was quirky in a lot of ways, but I've learned very much either to adapt or to just really change my life to make it fit me. And then the physical stuff, I didn't really know why it was happening, like what the cause of things were. And I've been working away at that since I was 14, essentially. And then essentially what happened is two things happened at once. My husband and I were having a conversation and we were arguing about the facts of something.
Okay.
And he literally said to me, like, I don't care what the truth is. I just don't even care anymore. And I remember thinking, what? like, and I mean, it's not like we haven't had these conversations before. It's not like I haven't interacted with other people before. Like I've been with other people who don't care what the truth is. And just for me and for my perception, I always just kind of brushed it off as like, they just don't want to admit they're wrong or they're hurting or something. Like I couldn't, but it finally struck me that he's like, I don't care what the truth is. And I just remember thinking like, I have no idea what that's like to like be okay with not knowing what the truth was. And then I just looked at him and I was like, I think I must be autistic. Like there has to be something weird about me because like I can't even comprehend. And then basically the very next day, my sister messaged me and she said, I was watching this comedian and she was talking about her Asperger's syndrome. And I think you should get tested because a lot of the things she was saying sounded like you. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I like looked up a little online test for Asperger's and then it started asking me questions. And I was like, okay, right? Like that's just weird stuff about me that I don't even know that I've like talked about. And they're like, they're saying these are symptoms of like being obsessed with numbers. So I'm like constantly reading license plates and like adding the numbers together and seeing what it would be numerologically. And I'm the house accountant. Like I'm constantly calculating like all this number stuff. And then it said, there were just like several things on that list that I was just thinking, okay, those aren't just weird things about me. That's autism. And so then I ended up finding a psychologist here where I am in Southeast Asia. And I did a session And by the end of the screening, he was laughing at me, like in a very kind way, like, but like I ticked so many of the boxes so very obviously that he was like, yeah, like you're kind of the poster child for this. And then how it all kind of fell into place with my physical stuff too. I was like, whoa, like it made my entire life make sense.
Sure.
But so yeah, essentially it happened because my sister and I both were just like, there might be something to this autism thing. And because I feel like right now there is a lot of people becoming more aware of autism, and it is getting kind of more attention in the media and social media and things like that. So it sort of made me consider it. Sure. Because my sister, like I say, my sister listening to somebody talk about their experience and her being like, that sounds like all stuff you do. And so that's how that happened.
Right. That's so interesting, because I think certainly, you know, when I was growing up, it wasn't really known about, it wasn't really talked about.
Right.
I think the only experience I ever had was watching that film Rain Man, you know, with Dustin Hoffman when I was a kid.
Right.
That was pretty much the only way I knew of framing what autism was.
Yeah.
So
I was just gonna say, like, growing up for us too, like I think there was like what people are saying now, right? That there's so much more kind of information about it with male autism. Right, the kind of like the hand waving and the delayed speech and the delayed kind of sense of it.
Yes.
So I think that's part of it as well, is the like and also, right, in spirituality world and all these things, the hypersensitivities just being labeled as like a spiritual thing, or a instead of you might be neurodiverse, like this. It's not just like you're a little bit more sensitive than other people, like, not to say that that's not a thing, but like you're like really actually neurologically hyper more sensitive than everyone else.
Yes, exactly. And I think you know, going back in time, it was, I think parents perhaps didn't have the knowledge to understand that these things all connected together could actually mean something.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yes, exactly. You know, they're all kind of like these cluster of things that seem almost unrelated. Absolutely. And,
you know, taken by themselves, any one of them could almost be sort of normal, or, you know, within a parameter of normal almost.
Right. Or something you can deal with or cope with to a degree.
Yes. Yeah. So when you put them all together and you've got the knowledge to understand that actually adds up to something that you can see all this. So a lot of my experience has been, since I've been diagnosed and aware of of being autistic, is looking back and sort of connecting the dots and going, oh, that's it as well. Yeah. Oh, that's it as well. Yes. Oh, that's interesting. Right. I didn't know that.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
So you'd always been aware of these differences then. You just didn't know, as you just said, what label to put on it or what to call it.
Yes.
So what was your childhood like? What were your experiences like in terms of, you know, when you look back with this new frame of reference? And this
so yeah, my childhood was, on the outside, very normal. We were middle class, Christian, went to school, like very, very quote unquote normal. But the experience I was having was very not normal. So I from day one, my mom said that as a baby, I didn't even want to be held. Like the normal, you can comfort your child by patting them on the back, by holding them, whatever. She said that never worked for me. Like, she could tell that I was like very much in pain and upset, but I didn't want to be held. I didn't want to be touched. I didn't want to be snuggled, but I didn't want to be left alone. So I just wanted her to like be there. And I got very, very overstimulated very, very easily. So I was just an incredibly emotional child. Like, I feel like I basically spent from 0 to 18, like, I think I cried every day. Like, I feel like I cried every day of my childhood. And then, like, on the physical side, I had colic, which we now know is my body did not produce the correct neurotransmitters and hormones to go into rest and digest. I was literally in a hyper cortisol state.
Whoa.
Pretty much from
Jesus.
birth all the way through my childhood. So growing up, like I say, my mom said, like, even as a little baby, I would eat just enough that I wasn't hungry, but not enough to be full because I was in so much pain. Like, eating was pain from the very beginning of my life for forever.
Right.
And then growing up through school, getting into school, they were sending me to the guidance counselor in grade 1 because I was so stressed out. Like, I would just cry, like, uncontrollably. And I could never understand why the kids were so mean to each other. I was never outcasted, but I sort of outcasted myself in a lot of ways. Like, I would try to be social, but so I always had friends, but I was always the one in the group that if someone's going to get kicked out, it's going to be me.
Okay.
If someone's going to, like, I'm not the popular girl. I was never, and then so through junior high and high school, I became like the counselor. So I was really, really good at understanding people. I was a very, very, very good therapist from forever. Yeah.
And that's something that seems that a lot of people don't understand about us, I think. Because we've got that stereotype,
So
don't we, of,
frustrating.
we don't have any empathy, etc.
Yeah.
Half empathy.
Whereas actually, in my experience personally, and from talking to so many people about it, it seems that actually we've got bucket loads of empathy.
Yes.
And actually, a lot of us are empaths as well, aren't we? And that we actually pick up emotions and from the atmosphere almost.
Oh my goodness. Yes, exactly that. So basically, I spent my entire childhood almost feeling like I could hear people's thoughts. Because like going to church, for instance, it would be this like overwhelming, all-consuming wave of just feeling what everyone was feeling.
And you're talking a lot of people, I suppose, in that environment, aren't you?
Absolutely, yes,
Yeah.
right? And so going to school, going to any large event, I empath literally everything. And understanding that was different than how everyone else was feeling, didn't really happen to me until very recently, the last couple of years. Like to the extreme degree that I can be having a conversation with someone and I can feel when they start thinking about something else, right? Like, I'm incredibly empathic. But I think when they say that we lack empathy, I think what they really mean is that we process emotions totally differently.
Right.
And we process what we are perceiving very differently. And this is we get on the, okay, well, what's the truth? And what's reality? And what's practical? And what's the pragmatic solution? So when someone comes to me with a problem, a lot of the time humans are in an emotional state and they want to be validated and they want to be heard and listened to and told that their emotions are real and that's all and that's all good. But they then feel when you start saying, okay, and here's what you can do about it, most people feel like you're blaming them.
Yes, and people don't like being given advice, generally.
Exactly. Right? And then as someone with Asperger's now, I understand that, like, I've lived my whole life being like, why does everyone get so mad at me when I do that? Like, I'm helping. I'm bringing you the solution.
That's a practical solution that you can use.
Yes, exactly. And like your power, because I know you want to hear that it's all them or that it's all the system, or like that you're a victim. But why do you want that? Like, I've never understood that. I've always like, why don't you want to know what your power is? Like, anyways, so that has been a big thing in my life. It's just like a lot of people feeling like I'm attacking them or I'm blaming them for their problems or whatever, because I'm presenting, well, here's how you're playing a role in it, and here's what you can do about it. And all they hear is, and here's how you're shitty.
Right.
So that was kind of a lot growing up. And then, on the physical side of things, I went through puberty at 14 and then went into menopause at 15, basically. Because my cortisol levels were just so high. They completely antagonized all of my sex hormones. So I physically developed, I did it, and then I quit that. It's basically what happened is my body just went into, And so that's the other thing is like, I really learned how to be a high functioning, anxiety ridden, depressed person. Like I was just in, like, so basically by grade 8, I spent 6 months of that year just on the couch, just decimated because of my, like, and like in essentially like staring into the middle distance.
So you're what, about 15?
I was 14, yeah, 14 to 15, yeah. So I had cysts on my ovaries. I had like, yeah, I had just a lung infection I could never get rid of. My immune system was terrible. I couldn't digest anything, so I would have like doubled over in pain stomach aches once or twice a week for my entire life. Like never not having that. And then everything that I ate hurt to a degree. Like there was no such thing as having something and feeling good. And so yeah, basically it all kind of like crescendoed at 15. And then I just realized I was like, I have to do something about this. Like I'm gonna have to do something about this. Like I can't keep doing this. So I started dieting, of course, at 15. But in a roundabout way, this really helped because it eventually got me into like, I started just like studying nutrition and psychology and all of these, like this is when I really started hitting my stride. I got a job at the health food store so that I could buy my own food and prepare my own food. Like I started cooking for myself. I started, like I say, working so that, and like I say, I was a high achiever, overachiever, like A's in all my courses, in every dance performance, every after school, like I was in every performance you could do. I was a dancer, I was a singer, I was actress, I was all of these things. And I was like crippled with anxiety the entire time. Just like, I remember, I don't think I slept from junior high till like the last couple of years. And I remember learning how to work through or dance through or a panic attack. Like I learned how to literally have a panic attack and just not show it on the outside.
Yeah, you can
do
that.
And I remember people talking about their anxiety and talking about their depression and like, and like being bedridden and like staying in all day and like not acting, like not doing stuff when they feel like that. And I remember thinking like, well then how would you ever get anything done? Because don't you always feel like that?
Because
like
you did. Yeah.
I did, right?
Yeah.
And then so that was my childhood. It was just a lot of extreme emotion, and then yes, my parents really did not understand what was going on and were very, very, very overwhelmed by me. And therefore it was like a very contentious environment and not healthy. And we struggled a lot. And so, like I say, I was like really sick and really, really hypersensitive and incredibly neurodiverse and being blamed for it because I was causing turmoil and I could just never be okay. And then I just learned how to work through pain. Like I just really learned that there was like, it wasn't okay to stay home. It wasn't okay to quit. It wasn't okay to not do it. So you just do it. And so that was my childhood.
And did you get taken to the doctors during that period about these various different things?
Right. They would take me to the doctor and they'd be like, well, you look fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's all
right.
in your
Like
head.
There's nothing obviously on the outside wrong with you. We do a blood test. There's nothing that comes up. And then when the hormone thing happened, they were like, yeah, okay, like you're 15 and you essentially have no sex hormones and your cortisol is through the roof, but like you're 15. It can't be that you're stressed. Like we don't understand, like, so I tried everything. They wanted to put me on the pill, but that was a little bit too, my mom thought it was like a little bit too young to just put me on hormone replacement therapy. So we did like bioidentical creams for a while. We did like off and on, but like I say, like my parents were not diligent about it. They didn't pursue it. It wasn't until I really started taking the reins of my own health at 15 that anything started to like change. Yeah.
Find your own solutions.
So have things improved since? As in, since you've been managing your diet and doing these other things?
Dramatically, yes. Like I am
really
very, very high functioning for where I kind of come from and came from. So from 15 to now, essentially, I've been my own science project because there were no doctors, there were no people who understood what was going on with me. It was all very just you don't have your period, you're incredibly stressed out and anxious and depressed, and like you just kind of need to get your shit together. and I don't think that I even knew to communicate that I was like in chronic pain or that I was chronically ill, because it was so normal for me.
And that's and certain things I think almost feel as if they are kind of normalized anyway. Like, not to the extreme you're describing, but certainly, you know, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I used to get horrendous period pain. And like debilitating, incapacitating. I would pass out, I would be unable to do anything.
Right.
But nobody ever thought to take me to the doctor. I don't blame, because it's just one of those things that people think, oh, it's just period pain. It's just supposed to be just painful.
Exactly.
Turns out I've actually got endometriosis.
Right, exactly.
I now know.
Wow.
But nobody ever thought to question it, because it's just something you're supposed to put up with, because that's what comes with being female.
That's just what being a woman is. Exactly. Exactly. True. Yes. And I think that that's a big part of it. And then I think the other part of it for me was the like not even knowing that what I was experiencing wasn't normal.
Exactly.
Because there wasn't a before. Like there wasn't a time where I was healthy. And then I lost it, so I knew the difference. It was like I had always felt like that.
Yes, you lose
so
it,
I didn't know to communicate. Like, no, I literally never eat and don't have a stomach ache. Because I just thought that must be normal. It must be that everyone feels this way.
You have nothing to compare it to.
Exactly. So I think that was a big, big part of it. And so starting to kind of like actually compare and contrast my experience with other people's experiences, I started to be like, oh, okay, well, this is like super not normal then. Like I'm starting to come into terms with, this isn't just a little bit off. This is really off and really bad. So yeah, like I say, since from 15 to now, I've literally completely changed everything in my life. Like, and I say that because that's how I even made it to 31 without a diagnosis and not just going crazy or giving up, because I have found ways to manage my mental emotional stuff. And this is kind of what I teach in my work now, is how to look at all the things that we think are wrong with us. So I looked at my anxiety, my depression, my obsessive compulsive, because that's like a really big part of Asperger's syndrome, is to become very obsessive compulsive. So I definitely was anorexic. So like combined, like literally can't eat, nothing ever feels good. Societal pressures,
emotional stuff.
Exactly, all the emotional stuff, feeling like an absolute failure because I can't be social, I can't be normal, I'm too overwhelmed all the time. I don't know how to like engage with people on their level, like, because that was always the thing. I've just always been very intense. Like, if you're going to talk to me, you're going to come and we're going to talk about your life issues. We're not going to like talk about TV, because I don't watch TV and I don't look at magazines. I don't know what's going on in fashion. I don't know what's going on in pop culture because I don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But just feeling so worthless. Just like, I'm weak. I'm sick. I'm socially awkward. Like, I have nothing to offer. There's nothing good about me. Was kind of where I started.
Like a failure.
And I make everything worse. Like, everyone hates me because I'm just, all I do is point out what they're doing wrong, and all I do is make problems. Like, I just can't just be normal. I can't just be nice. I can't just get along. So we moved to Vancouver when I was 20, from where I was living in Canada with my parents. So we moved away from home, and I did the whole, like, I refused to go into debt. So I used all the money that I had saved working all through high school, always worked 2 jobs, put myself through nutrition diplomas, 2 nutrition diplomas.
Wow.
Well, 1.5, basically. I have 1 nutrition diploma and 1 half finished, and then we left. So, but then I did my life coach training. I did my yoga teacher training. Like, I was really like, no, like, I know that I have something and I want to help people, but I don't have enough money to go to university and I don't want to go into debt. So I'm just going to like learn this on the job. And so I learned how to work online. Like I started blogging and I started writing, and I really disciplined myself about that and got pretty okay at it, so that I eventually got hired to do that for like a actual job. And then that turned into me being able to run my own company. And then we were able to move to Asia. And so all of that was really good for my health. All of that was really good for my neurodiversity and not having to live a normal Western life where you're just completely overwhelmed by everything, because or where I was anyway. Like I just remember kind of a year into living on our own, I just remember thinking like, I can't do this. Like I can't do the hustle bustle 9 to 5, come home, work.
Sure. So was that in terms of the time that you were working, the length of time you were at work, combined with what?
Well,
the peopling?
Yes, like the peopling was just too much for me, and the physical toll it took. Like, because I wanted, right? Like we made all of our own food. I did all our own cooking. I did all our own cleaning. I did all our own everything. And going to school and having a side hustle and having a regular job. And then the regular job too was always like secretary work or whatever. And it was just mind numbing. Like I couldn't do it. Like I was like, this is so, like I mentally and emotionally cannot do something so repetitive every day. Like I'm not being creative. I didn't feel like I was accomplishing anything.
Yes, that's what I don't
and then at the same
get,
time
those
feeling just
people.
so physically exhausted and sick all the time, and just like there was no reprieve.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you say that, because it just makes me think that it's a real problem for us generally. I think that we need to be really stimulated and interested and engaged in what we're doing. And as you say, very repetitive things don't work for me either. But at the same time, we often don't have the capacity to work either full time or around a lot of people.
Right.
So it's kind of that dichotomy of what you do, because you obviously want interesting, engaging work, but at the same time, you maybe don't have the capacity to do that in the way that other people might.
Absolutely, right? And so it was just kind of over years of trial and error, I kind of created this job for myself that I have.
So I was going to say, can you tell us exactly what it is you do? I was going to come on to that, but tell us.
Sure. So essentially, it all started with, I was the resident holistic nutritionist for a company that was building like nutrition programs for people who wanted to try a raw or like a vegan lifestyle.
Okay.
So that's how it started, and it started with just kind of being in there, and I was a community manager on Facebook, so all the participants were in a Facebook group, and I was there to community manage and did a lot of emails, and I did a lot of content creation, so writing blogs, helping to write their programs, and then moved to another company doing the same thing while I started my company. So the first thing that I did with my company was I wrote a book called The Perception Diet, because through having anorexia, I had anorexia, and then I sort of like physically recovered, and then was essentially in a relapse for a really long time, but not underweight in any way, because my body was just completely on fire and inflamed, and so I looked like a normal weight. And then I had several kind of just like moments of breakthrough of like figuring out why I was like that, like the emotional stuff that was going on, and the process, like the mental processes that were going on, and like my conditioning, and the things that I believed to be true that weren't true, and the things that I believed about reality that just weren't reality. And I started to like jailbreak myself from this, you have to be thin in order to be anything. And I was like, whoa, like I started to like feel good, and I didn't lose any weight. Like I was same weight for like several months, and was eating more food and like finding peace in my body, even in my body where it was like in pain all the time. I was like, no, my body like is on my side, and I can listen to my body, and like it actually is helping me. It's not something I have to fight. And like all of these pieces started to get put together. So I wrote a book called The Perception Diet, and that was the first thing I ever did. And it's 7 tools to help you look at like, what do you believe about yourself, and what do you believe about life, and what are you making this body stuff need, and what is this programming, and like what's actually underneath it, right? Because it's like, you don't actually hate your body. It's not really even about your body. It's not really about food. It's about, you don't feel okay to be yourself. You feel that you don't know who you are. You feel antagonized. You feel all these things. So just slowly that, and then I started a YouTube channel, just talking about these kinds of concepts. And that was the beginning. And then eventually it turned into doing a lot of one-on-one coaching with people. So like life coaching and this emotional mastery work of like, and like I say, like learning how to validate people and really be there to just hold space for them.
Yes.
And then give the insight. And then because I can feel what's going on in their body, I can feel what's going on in their mind, I can usually like read their history. Like people will come to me like, so is this what's going on with your mom? And this is what's going on with your dad? And this is what your childhood was like? And this, and this. And they're like, oh my God. Because it's just like obvious to me. And so that's started getting into that. And then I started my mystery school, which now has 2 one-year curriculums. So it has a 500-page document for each curriculum and about 100 videos for each.
And this is an extension of the work you've been doing, the sort of one-to-one work?
Exactly. So this is basically the one-to-one work all written out. Like everything I know about how to connect with your body's wisdom and connect with real reality and break yourself out of your conditioning. So like everything I had to do to create this life that, like I say, like I figured out I had autism and was like, wow, like I've literally created the perfect life for someone with autism without even knowing that I had it. As in for someone with high functioning autism. So exactly what you just said. You have to be very engaged. You have to feel like you're creating something, but you can't work full time and you can't be overstimulated by people. So I created my company where I'm in complete control of the curriculum that I'm creating. And so I run my company from home. It's all digital.
Awesome.
I can laser focus and get like very specific about this very, very, very intense topic and say everything there is to say about it and unturn every stone. And so I have like a million meditations and exercises and questions to ask yourself. And so I've written these 2 things. And that's basically what I do now is I make YouTube videos about this stuff, about nervous system reprogramming, about emotional mastery, about physical, mental, emotional, how these things all connect, about how to find your true self, about why we're all so traumatized as a human race. And
she got it.
I kind of feel like I've been
Amazing.
the alien studying human nature. Because like we were saying before, that like it's not that we don't have empathy, it's just that we very much process things very differently.
Yeah.
And so I look for systems and I look for overarching patterns and I look for how do all these things connect.
Yes.
And that's actually a symptom of Asperger's, is to be constantly looking for the connection. So, and I've been able to use that in a very healthy way to be like, this is why humanity is functioning the way that it is. This is why we're in so much pain. This is why we keep falling in these same holes. And here's what we can do about it. So that's what I do for a living.
That's brilliant. I love that you've managed to create something, as you say, that suits you so well.
Yeah.
And I've kind of done the same thing in a slightly more conscious way, probably, because it was the same year that I got diagnosed that I started my business.
Right.
But yeah, it's great when we can find a way to play to our strengths, really, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's exactly it, right? Like I've essentially created this thing where I can be in my strength and I don't have to do anything that is my weakness. Really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's about, if you're lucky enough to be able to do it, it's about kind of creating something that just suits what you need, what you want, and doesn't include the things that don't work for you.
Right. And also thinking like where I can be most of service, right? Like where I can use what I have and what is special and unique about me to serve the biggest amount of people. Sure. And because that's how it always felt working those kind of like the cashier jobs and the whatever. I always just felt like I owe the world more than this. Like, not to say that those things aren't important and that those things aren't valuable because they are.
Of course.
It was just, it felt like this isn't what I have to offer. Like, I just always felt like I have something inside of me that I need to give.
Yes,
And
exactly.
this is not it. And I don't feel like I'm reaching my potential.
Not wasting
so
your potential.
And that is essentially like the overarching big picture of what I do is I want to help people
Yes.
figure out who they are.
Yes.
Like, do exactly what I did. Figure out who they are. And what does your life need to look like for you to live like that? And like I say, like now looking back and being like, man, like if someone like me with Asperger's syndrome and having been antagonized for my Asperger's syndrome and being physically debilitated my entire life can figure it out, right? Like literally I thought absolutely everything about me was wrong. And I had to learn to embrace all these parts of myself so that I could then find what they need, so that I could then find how they're good.
Yes, it's like instead of battling against it,
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
it's about embracing it and finding the way that you can make it work.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what it is. So I feel like if I can do it, anyone can do it.
That's just so inspirational and so great to hear. And I'm really interested actually in backtracking a little bit back to this physical side, because I know that this is a very personal story to you, but it's also quite a universal story in terms of, I think a lot of us that are autistic do suffer from various physical conditions and symptoms. So what can you tell us about that in terms of, how common it is? Do you know, the connection between autism and these physical difficulties? Because I know that I have plenty, but there doesn't seem to be very much out there about it.
Yes.
Apart from anecdotally, from people just talking about it.
Right, exactly. And I think it's because people are lacking how these things all connect. Because, so like I say, before my diagnosis, I essentially had all this stuff figured out and how it all connected, and I just had it backwards. So essentially what I'm saying is like, so in my situation, for me, because of the hyper cortisol state, so I believe that this is a very common thing with people with autism in general and Asperger's specifically.
Yes.
Is there's the high cortisol.
Yes.
And there's the low serotonin. There's the low oxytocin. There's the low like tryptophan. This is, and I mean, I think a part of the reason that the information about this is so not well known is because these things are just not well known. Like testing for neurotransmitters is not common. So I remember them putting me like on anti-anxiety medication or SSRIs and literally it having no effect. Like absolutely no effect. I could go right off it, and like when they're like, wean yourself off, I could just stop taking it and it would be like no difference. Nothing happened.
It's really interesting, isn't it, how it seems to me, just from listening to people and my own experience, that either we're very, very sensitive to medications and things, or it seems some people don't have any effect whatsoever. So painkillers don't work, and so on. Yeah. I'm the first category. So if I take something, I've thrown up Gaviscon tablets in the past. That is definitely stomach because my body just goes no. That's too much. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And that's how I am with pretty much everything else. Right. Like I can't have anything with caffeine. I can't have any, like everyone's on the mushroom drinks right now. Like cannot. I would not sleep for like 4 days. Right. Like so sensitive. Like with anti-anxiety and antidepressant medication, it never worked for me because there was no serotonin to reuptake. Like don't have the hormone, or when you don't have the neurotransmitter, you can't recycle the neurotransmitter. So, right. So this is what I'm starting to figure out now is so, and then when we have these lack of these rest and digest hormones, we're going to have cortisol to take their place. That's because your body is going to be in a stress state from not having those. And then also because sex hormones antagonize the cortisol.
Right.
So this is what, like tryptophan, dopamine, oxytocin, these are hormones that are neurotransmitter based that increase the relaxation response in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you digest your food. That's where you have healthy reproductive function. That's where you have clear thinking, like open consciousness. You're curious, you're creative, you're expansive. You feel warm, you feel connected, you feel not alone, you feel not isolated, right? When you don't have these and you have cortisol instead, you feel like you're under attack. Even when your brain knows that you're not, when your mind can see that you aren't, oftentimes not even that, right? Like we will actually start to create stories about what's happening or about what could happen in the future, about this to explain to ourselves why we feel this uneasy sense or this anxiety, right? And then we don't feel close to people. We have trouble digesting our food. We're going to have a lot of reproductive issues because you're not producing enough estrogen, or you'll have too much estrogen because you don't have enough progesterone, and all of these things tie together. And so we're having this high anxiety, high cortisol, like you're physically stressed. Even if you're not mentally or emotionally stressed,
Tense
your
all the
physical
time.
stress
Yes.
can trigger mental and emotional stress. And then you're hypersensitive. So you're literally already taking in more stimulation than everyone else is, right? And that was another funny thing about me, is like learning again that I was like so sensitive to sound, to touch, to light, to like noise especially, but that they're like usually someone with autism will be sensitive to one or two of these things, and I'm hypersensitive to all of them. And then I only have cortisol, and then how that ties into digestion is when you don't have these rest and digest hormones, the signals that send the messages to your intestinal tract to contract, that peristalsis that moves through your body, doesn't happen. So when that doesn't happen, you have lack of motility of food through your system. So then food will sit in your gut, and especially in your large intestine. And because it's dark, it's alkaline, it's damp, moist, and it's warm, it will start to ferment. The food that's in there will start to ferment. So then there is now more and more research coming out about how people with autism have massive imbalances in their gut.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I was diagnosed with celiac disease about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
After years of horrendous difficulties and not knowing what was going on, being told I had IBS, which I do, but this was a different thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And the reason that happens is because when food isn't moving through your system properly and it ferments in your gut, what that does is that causes a proliferation of the bad bacteria, candida, fungus, mold, yeast, all of these critters that are antagonistic to our tissue. These critters then attack our tissue. So actually cause what they call leaky gut.
Yes.
So
Yes, I've heard of that.
Exactly.
They weaken the membrane, your intestinal lining. So what happens is then foods that are only partially broken down, proteins and other molecules, can get through the gut lining that shouldn't be able to get through the gut lining. They get into your bloodstream, which then your body, your immune system, perceives that as a foreign invader, starts to either give you a histamine reaction,
Yes,
so now you're having allergic reactions to your food, or it starts to attack your tissue.
Which is kind of the same, similar as what happens with celiac disease, which is a similar sort of thing where if I eat gluten, my body thinks that's a foreign body and tries to get it, and then I get very, very ill.
Exactly. And the reason that gluten molecule is even getting into your bloodstream is because the wall is not thick enough that gluten molecule gets broken down properly and expelled. That's why it's being put through the gut. It's leaking through the gut and being attacked. You see? So when we are in hyper states of stress, this lowers digestive motility. This causes all of these bad bacteria, all these things to bloom out of control, which weaken the gut lining, which then causes that leaky gut, which then causes the immune system to overreact. And then you start having even like autoimmune conditions. The immune system starts to attack your cells, the immune system starts to attack your body, and then that weakens the gut even further, which weakens peristalsis even more, which actually causes a stress response for your body, which makes you produce even more cortisol. So then it's this loop of the snake eating its own tail that you can never get rid of.
So do you think then that, given that these things seem to have such a high prevalence with autistic people, how much of it is that we are predisposed to have these things, and how much of it is because our lives are quite stressful and we tend to be very sensitive to physical and emotional and whatever stimuli? How much is one or the other, do you think?
Right. So I'm going to just speak from looking at myself as kind of the test subject. My mom told me I've been this way since birth. So either I was literally already stressed out because of being so hypersensitive to everything as a child, like as a baby. But to me, it seems to be more the other way around. It seems to be like we are born and we're not producing the right hormones. We're not producing the right chemicals, like from go.
Mm-hmm.
And then that sets up the cascade. And so what I think is the solution is understanding that, like, well, first of all, like when your baby is born and they are very sensitive to touch and they don't want to eat and all these things, they might be in a hypersensitive state and perceiving so much more than everyone else. And so, like, don't take your baby into big crowds, like kind of thing, like don't overstimulate them, don't shake things in their face. Like there's gonna be, like, you're gonna need to work with the baby's already taking in more information than they can handle. You don't need to stimulate them, you actually need to help calm them down, like like regulate, like learning how to regulate someone with autism. Like what I have learned for myself, like as an adult, since we're talking to adults here, learning how to regulate yourself is the first step. And that is like, first and foremost, I think everyone needs to start like physically. The best thing someone can do is orient. Like when you're in that hyper overwhelmed state, list the 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you feel, 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste. Feel your feet on the earth, and then actively open your chest. Take big, deep belly breaths, like communicate to your body that you're safe right now.
Because
we do have to acknowledge that our hormones, like I say, I don't think it's predisposed. I think we come like that. Our hormones are different, and this is going to be different for everyone, like because autism is a spectrum. You might not be as extreme as me, you might be somewhere else, but still.
Yeah, but the principle, I think.
The principle is we're overproducing cortisol. We're underproducing these, like, right, the anxiety, the depression. It's super common with people with autism and Asperger's. And it's not that we're predisposed, it's that our bodies literally aren't making the hormones. We don't have the hardware.
And that actually makes so much sense to me, because I mean, throughout my life, it feels to me as if I've got gradually worse. So it wasn't that I was very bad as a kid, but it feels like it's almost like an accumulative thing as I've got older.
Absolutely.
I'm tireder, I need more sleep.
Yep. And that's the kind of degradation process of chronic stress.
Yeah. There you go.
Absolutely. And so I think the first thing is, like, yes, we have to like unprogram ourselves. Like the mental emotional side is huge, because we tend to experience so much guilt and so much shame and so much just, I shouldn't be this way, I'm not normal, this isn't good. And it's bad. It's like bad to be autistic. Like even when we get a diagnosis, it's like, oh, this is something wrong with me. And I'm like, no, like we can't look at it like that. Like, yes, it's challenging, and yes, but what I'm saying is, it's not something wrong with you.
No, exactly. I mean, I've actually done a post on this before. It's that, that there was nothing wrong with me all along. No. I was just autistic.
You just have specific
I'm just
needs.
different. Yes.
Different specific
and you have specific needs, and every human has specific needs. Like, we would not blame a fish for not surviving well on the shore.
Exactly.
We would say that fish isn't getting its needs met. And we as a human race haven't caught up to when a human isn't doing well. It's not that they're sucking at doing life. It's they're not getting their needs met.
Yeah.
So if we can start to say, okay, this is just how I am. This is who I am. I'm not going to be ashamed that I don't fit into capitalist society that tells me I'm supposed to be a socialite who cares about culture and is productive 24/7. Like, I'm sorry. I don't think that's healthy for anybody. I don't think it's working for anybody. And I think us autistic people need to just be the ones that stand up and just say, we're not even going to entertain that is a functional system, because it isn't. Yes, and I think more people could actually learn from us what it's like to just embrace what you actually want and need, and the pace and speed of things that you need, and coming into safety first, and then seeing what you want to do from there.
I think there's a big piece there, isn't there, around people actually figuring out what it is that they need.
Yes, and the way that we do that is by embracing our symptoms. Because our symptoms, all the things we think are wrong with us, are really the parts of us that aren't getting their needs met.
So I was going to say, it's almost like a little message, isn't it?
It's
from your body.
That. That's exactly it, right? Where you have the most anxiety, where you have the most depression, where you have the most pain, where you have the most struggle, where you're tired and you can't do it. That's not something wrong with you. That's the message from your internal guidance system saying, this is antagonistic to me. This isn't how I work. I have a false belief around this, and I'm doing it in a way that's not productive or helpful. This isn't true or right for me. That's what that means. And if we can start to approach life from that, even with, right, like I haven't been on hormone replacement therapy yet. And yet I've been able to actually improve so many of my health conditions just through managing diet, managing lifestyle, managing my stress. And I should be so much worse than I am.
I think because this stuff isn't really taught to us, is it? About how much of an impact a lifestyle and food and so on actually can have on your health. I think we're kind of taught to go to the doctor and they'll give you a pill.
Right, exactly. Because this is the thing, right? It's long term. Like, yes, I have made massive improvements over the last 15 years. That's not sexy. That's not fun.
That's not a quick fix.
No one wants to hear, put in the work, be consistent. It's not going to be fun or exciting. It's the kind of the same thing every day. You get into a routine and then you just do that. And in a couple of years, you'll be like totally amazed at where you are. But in the day-to-day, it's not going to be shiny or fun.
For sure.
Yeah.
But it's difficult though it is, it's still empowering to know that, isn't it? That, you know, if you really do put that effort in, you will be able to get those rewards. Health-wise, back out.
Exactly. Like, literally, I am a fish who learned to climb a tree, right? If I can improve my health over time instead of degrading from where I was, even without knowing the things that I now know, like just doing what I needed to do for my body, I've naturally done everything natural you can do. Like every therapy, everything that actually works for autistic people, I already did. Like I figured out how to do it on my own, just by following what do I need.
Because you were listening to yourself and your own body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that. That's so inspiring. Well, I could talk to you all day, seriously.
Yeah.
I really do. However, we are kind of nearing the end of our time now. And
all right.
So I'm just going to draw this to a close by asking you one last thing, which I ask everybody.
Absolutely.
I'm going to ask you if you could go back in time to before you were diagnosed or before you understood that you were autistic. What age would you go back to, and what would you tell yourself at that age?
Age 12.
Yeah, of course I wish I could go back.
Age 11.
To day one. If I could go back and tell my grade 1 self.
Okay.
Sweetheart, you're not broken.
Yes.
You are feeling everything that everyone else isn't feeling. You are sick and no one knows. and just there's nothing wrong with you. And I think I just would have told her, you're going to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to figure this out. Don't give up on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with you, and you can do this. Like, I think I just would have tried to, being that I couldn't change anything about my circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I would have tried to say.
Sure. And that's the thing, isn't it? You know, we can't actually go back, obviously, and we can't change what's been. But sometimes I just think it would be lovely if we could go back and just give ourselves that little pep talk.
Yes, exactly. And so I just want to say that to anyone out there who's listening to this, who's struggling and feeling like it's overwhelming and you don't know what's going on and you don't know what the answer is and all that stuff, is just, you got this. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. You can figure this out, and there's just nothing wrong with you.
Well, thank you ever so much for coming on and being my guest today. I've so enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
For autistics, this is even more true. We should not be forced to create a public self and disregard our needs, because we are different. We have different needs, and therefore we need to honor our true self, our autistic needs, our body's needs. Our bodies are different. They function in a different way. They are quicker to be stressed. It's just not the same for us autistics. And therefore, our experience should be validated, honored, listened to, and not disregarded, devalued, gaslit, and all of that. And especially about eating in a way that fits your body's needs. It's not the same for every autistic, but if you are allowed to find your own solutions that make you feel best, your sensory sensitivities will be reduced and your anxiety will be reduced, and as a result you are less stressed. Diet is a very important thing in autism and managing health issues. It improves overall your quality of life. So, don't just label autistics with eating disorder. That's so actually discriminating our autistic body's needs. So physicians and psychologists, there should be a real acknowledgement and validation for looking for solutions that work for each individual autistic and not putting us in boxes of more mental disorders. It doesn't help the cause at all. It causes more stress on top, because then the so-called treatment is actually the wrong approach.